Healings. The Bible's full of them. Have you ever desired the healing power of God, but wondered if you had enough faith to receive it? Well, in today's story, we're going to find out that sometimes the answer lies in the little things. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to another edition of Bible Alive. And today, another great story in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And this story is about Naaman. Many people probably have not heard of Naaman, but what a story it is. And we're going to talk about that. But just before we do, I want to introduce again my great friends here. Mark, my pastor of my church. I've really enjoyed some of the shows that we've been doing. The insight that you've had, and I know it's from lots of studying and lots of praying. I'm glad that you're here today.
I'm glad to be here, yeah.
And Tim, a business associate. Tim, you're always full of questions, and I like that too, because that's what we need. We need to flush this thing out, and I'm glad you're here to make it real for us.
Well, and as you said, this is a story that not a lot of people know, and it's one that we were just talking about, because I said, I don't know much about Naaman. And both these guys said, good, then ask some questions. I said, okay, I will.
Well, what we're going to talk about right now is the beginning of this, just to kind of work on it a little bit. Here's this guy. Well, before we start that, you need to open your Bibles. Get those Bibles. You need to have them when you get to our program, Bible Alive. It's 2 Kings in the Old Testament, 2 Kings chapter 5, and this whole thing is about Naaman. So it starts out that here's this guy by the name of Naaman. He is the commander-in-chief of the whole army of Syria. Now, Syria was not a nation that God had normally blessed. It was Israel. But yet, we're gonna talk about that. But this guy is a commander. It actually says he was honorable to the Lord, but he had a problem, and that problem was leprosy. And I want to talk a little bit about leprosy just for a second. What did leprosy represent, and how bad was it? We don't get that in the United States, as far as I know today.
Right. Leprosy, of course, the Bible uses leprosy, and you asked what it represented. We'll start there first. The Bible uses leprosy to represent sin.
Okay.
The nature of leprosy, it was very interesting. Leprosy was a disease that when a person contracted leprosy, it would begin by deadening the nerve endings in the body. And a lot of times, if people have heard of leprosy, they think of people whose fingers and toes drop off. It wasn't quite like that. It was that, the same way as you put your hand over a flame and you feel the flame and you pull your hand back, what would happen if the nerve endings were gone and you didn't feel that?
Nothing.
People
You might smell your flesh,
right.
but you wouldn't.
It's going to burn. You have no idea.
And so what would happen is you start to lose your sensitivity, and you'd be prone to injure yourself. And isn't that how sin works in our lives?
That's right. Slowly but surely, till finally it's just ruined us.
Yeah, your conscience deadens, and you begin to inflict injury on yourself, and you don't realize necessarily that you're doing it. And so leprosy was representative of sin, and leprosy was incurable.
That's right.
From most any means. It had to take a miracle to cure leprosy in Bible times, for sure.
And so here's Naaman. You go into the verse 1 here, and it said that the Lord had given victory to Syria, and it says he was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. And then in verse 2, I think it's something that says, and the Syrians had gone out on raids, and on one particular raid had brought back a captive, which was a young girl. And sometimes I wonder what, with the raid, what they did to the parents. They might have killed them right there in front of her. I mean, this little girl, of all girls, getting taken away from her parents, she was a young girl. She could have been very bitter, cried a lot, but there was something that this young girl did.
Yeah, she actually recommended, and it's actually fascinating to think about in light of what you just said. I mean, if somebody kills your parents, or at least raids and takes you away captive, I mean, how are you going to feel about them?
Right.
But what this young girl did is she actually recommended to her new master and his wife that, hey, you got leprosy. I know somebody who can heal your leprosy.
But wouldn't you think that a general like Naaman, wouldn't he say, well, no, you're a little crazy. You're saying to go to see this prophet and that sort of thing, and I just captured you. We've done all this damage to your area, your people, and that sort of thing. Now you're trying to tell me how I can get rid of this stuff? Matt, you're
Well, one thing I didn't bring up about leprosy is when a person contracted leprosy, the people in Bible times thought that it was highly contagious. We've learned since that it wasn't exactly the case, but they thought you couldn't touch, you couldn't be near it, or you'd get it. And so a leper was confined. They were basically cut off from their family, cut off from their friends. And I suppose if you had that leprosy for a period of time in desperation, if nothing else,
Right.
here's the hope of a possible cure.
Even if you're crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, and
You would try anything.
You would
You would try anything.
now I have seen people that have been sick, and and I've even talked to them. You know, there could be some different ways of being healed. Obviously, we have to trust in God, but sometimes we put all of our faith and trust in doctors. There's nothing wrong with doctors. I have a lot of doctor friends, but the trust we should put in is not man, but God. And so, listen to this little girl. It's just something. She could have been just pouting away, but here's what she says. She said, then she said, this little young girl, then she said to her mistress, if only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy. And this is the thing, like you said, Tim, he could have thought, well, she's got to be crazy. But it says, so the king of Syria said, it says, and Naaman went, in verse 4, and Naaman went in and told his master, which would have been the king, saying, thus and thus said the girl who is from the land of Israel. So the king of Syria said, go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold. And you know, in my Bible right here, I mean, you think about that. It says that we're talking about like $218,400 on one, and it's like 2 million. The shekels of gold was $2,184,000 in our time today. In other words, we're talking about a lot of money that this Naaman says, if you can heal me, I am happy. But the king was doing it for Naaman because he really cared about Naaman. He was a great commander. And so he goes to the king of Israel.
Yeah. And what's the king of Israel do?
I'm amazed. What?
No, let's pause for a minute before you get into that, because this is
Before
the
you're
shocking
amazed.
part. Before you're amazed. I mean, we just read that this young maid that was taken captive, she said, if only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he might heal him. Maybe he could. He would heal him.
He would heal him.
She was confident. She had no question that if he were only near the prophet in Israel, he'd get healing. But now Naaman comes to the king of Israel.
The king of Israel, which should be should be the highest person close to God. He's the king of this spiritual nation.
That's right.
I don't know, you might want to
He's like the leader of
say,
the-
I get kind of
So this
ticked
is
off
the-
when I read this.
This is the leader of the World Council of Churches.
Yeah.
I mean, you're expecting this man to be the spiritual. Of course God can heal. And what happens?
I hate to even talk about it because it's just, but you know, I see it in my own life. But here's the king that says, he says, and it happened when the king of Israel read the letter. It says that he tore his clothes and said, am I God to kill and make alive? That this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me. In other words, the king's saying, listen, you're coming to me that I should heal you? First off, it was supposed to be God. That's number one. But second off, he says, you know, you're just trying to make a quarrel so you can raid more of our people. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's amazing what the king said. So Elisha, Elijah hears about it, and he goes, so it was when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king saying, why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. I am so glad that the story goes to there.
So was this a regular thing then, where the healing went on and on in stories like this, like with Naaman going to the